Welcome to the Restricted Handling Podcast. Let's dig in. Here's what's been going on in Russia in the last 24 hours. Yesterday, we spent a lot of time on the U.S. seizure of Russian-linked shadow tankers and how Moscow chose restraint over escalation. That story didn't go away overnight. It evolved. Today, the update is that Russia stuck with restraint. After a lot of rhetorical heat about piracy and international law, there was still no naval countermove, no mirrored seizure, no attempt to escalate at sea. That silence is the signal. The Kremlin seems to have made a conscious decision to firewall the tanker incident from its Ukraine strategy. The Shadow Fleet took the hit, Moscow swallowed the loss, and everyone moved on, at least on the surface. But what's interesting is where Russia chose to respond instead. Not at sea, in the air. Overnight, Russia launched a nuclear-capable intermediate-range ballistic missile, the Oreshnik, into western Ukraine. This wasn't the Eastern Front, and it wasn't a marginal strike. This was Lviv Oblast, far from the heaviest fighting and uncomfortably close to NATO borders. The missile was launched from Kapustin Yar, Russia's strategic missile test range, and Ukrainian tracking clocked it at around 13,000 kilometers per hour. That's not ambiguity. That's a billboard. This is an update on something we've talked about before, but with a major escalation. Russia used this system once back in 2024. At the time, it looked like a one-off demonstration. Today makes clear it wasn't. Moscow is now willing to reach for strategic-class systems again, and to do it while peace talks are actively underway. The strike hit critical infrastructure near the Stry gas storage complex, one of the largest gas facilities in Europe. No reported casualties, but again, that's beside the point. This was signaling, not targeting. Russia claims the strike was retaliation for an alleged Ukrainian drone attack on Vladimir Putin's residence in Valdai. Ukraine denies it ever happened. U.S. officials have said there's no evidence. Even President Trump publicly expressed skepticism. But the narrative gives Moscow the excuse it wants: a personal threat to the leader, answered with an outsized response. It's classic Kremlin storytelling. High drama, thin proof, maximal leverage. This missile strike landed right on top of another thread we discussed yesterday: security guarantees and peacekeeping forces. Overnight, Russia didn't just ignore European proposals. It rejected them outright. Moscow formally stated that any foreign troops deployed to Ukraine, including European peacekeepers, would be considered legitimate military targets. That's not posturing. That's a hard veto delivered in public, with a ballistic missile flying in the background for emphasis. Yesterday, we talked about momentum without clarity in the diplomatic track. Today, that ambiguity narrowed, but not in a reassuring way. The UK and France are still talking openly about post-war deployments and deterrence hubs. Ukraine is still pushing for firm guarantees. The United States is still keeping its language flexible. What's changed is Russia's tone. The Kremlin is no longer pretending these discussions are negotiable. It's restating its original demands: neutrality, demilitarization, political restructuring, and recognition of annexed territory, almost word for word from 2022. President Zelensky says a bilateral U.S.-Ukraine security guarantees document is essentially ready. President Trump says he's open to U.S. involvement, but conditional, and with Europe in the lead. That was true yesterday, and it's still true today. What's new is the contrast. While diplomats are polishing language, Russia is firing an IRBM toward the western edge of Ukraine. The gap between words and actions is getting harder to ignore. On the battlefield, the grind continues, and today's update reinforces what we've been hinting at. Russian forces are still pushing across multiple fronts: Sumy in the north, Kupiansk and Lyman in the east, Kostiantynivka and Pokrovsk deeper in Donetsk, but confirmed gains remain minimal. What's clearer now is why. New reporting underscores that Russia is not regenerating combat power at scale. New units exist on paper, but staffing is thin, equipment is mixed, and many formations are built around infantry-heavy assault tactics because that's what Russia can afford. Yesterday, we framed Russia's shift toward infiltration tactics as adaptation. Today, it looks more like compulsion. Small assault groups, motorcycles, buggies, bad weather movement, heavy reliance on drones. This isn't a modern combined arms renaissance. It's a force stretching itself to stay offensive without the reserves to do it cleanly. Ukraine's defenses, meanwhile, are doing exactly what they were designed to do. Fortified belts, layered obstacles, and constant drone surveillance are forcing Russia to pay for every meter. That hasn't changed since yesterday, but the cost is becoming more visible, even to Russian military bloggers. There's no breakthrough narrative anymore, just persistence and attrition. Winter warfare escalated sharply overnight, and this is a direct update to yesterday's discussion on energy strikes. Russian drones and missiles knocked out power across large parts of Dnipropetrovsk and Zaporizhzhia. Hospitals switched to generators. Water systems faltered. Transit shut down. In some areas, air raid sirens stopped working because there was no electricity to power them. This is the same playbook Russia has used before, but the timing makes it more punishing. Deep winter, exhausted infrastructure, and civilian fatigue all amplify the effect. What's changed today is the scale. More than 1 million people were affected by outages in a single wave. Major industrial plants suspended operations. Ukraine's largest private energy provider described operating in permanent crisis mode. Repair crews barely finish one fix before the next strike lands. This is not random. It's systematic pressure on civilian endurance. Ukraine's response, which we described yesterday as emerging, now looks like a sustained campaign. Ukrainian drones struck the Salyut aerospace engine plant in Moscow, a facility tied to defense production. Additional strikes were reported in Chechnya. Pro-Ukrainian Russian partisans claimed sabotage operations in Belgorod Oblast, destroying military transport vehicles and degrading logistics hubs well away from the front. This isn't symbolism anymore. It's repetition. And repetition is how campaigns announce themselves. Inside Ukraine, security services reported more arrests tied to Russian intelligence activity. Some cases involved agents embedded inside Ukrainian military units. Others involved civilians recruited online to collect targeting data or guide strikes against energy infrastructure. Yesterday, we talked about this as an ongoing threat. Today, the frequency is the update. Moscow is leaning harder on espionage and sabotage to compensate for constraints elsewhere. Zooming back out, the maritime picture remains tense but controlled. After the tanker seizure we discussed yesterday, another Russia-bound vessel in the Black Sea reported being struck by a drone or unmanned marine vehicle and diverted to Turkish waters. No casualties, no spill, but insurance markets don't wait for attribution. Risk is risk. The Black Sea remains a pressure cooker, and every incident raises the stakes just a little higher. And looming over all of this, still quietly terrifying, is nuclear arms control. The New START treaty expires on February 5th. No replacement, no inspections, no clear path forward. Russia is showcasing strategic systems. China's arsenal continues to grow. Communication channels are thin. This didn't change overnight, but today's Oreshnik strike made the timeline feel a lot shorter. Thanks so much for listening and for being part of the RH community. If you enjoyed this episode, subscribing, leaving a quick 5-star review, or sharing it with someone you know makes a huge difference. It's how this network will grow. We also publish a daily written intel brief on Substack, where you'll find even deeper coverage of Russia and China, along with insights on the Middle East and the DPRK. This is free for Substack subscribers. Starting January 16th, new Substack subscribers will move to a paid model. If you're already subscribed on Substack before then, nothing changes. You'll keep full access to everything, free forever. New subscribers after January 15th will receive the daily written brief, weekly deep dives on economics, sanctions, and more for a monthly fee. So if you're not on Substack yet, don't worry. Just head to restrictedhandling.com and subscribe now for free and get the content free forever.